folks, I'm back. This is Mrs. Sid. I'm going to finish up these notes with you that we didn't quite get done on Friday. We ran out of time. So I wanted to make sure you knew about increasing, decreasing, and constant intervals. And I'm actually going to throw in some types of discontinuity. So these are our notes from last week, Friday. We're working on these in breakout session with your folks in your breakout session. By the way, all these pages I'm scrolling past, if you don't know how to do them, get a hold of me. We can talk. Okay, so increasing, decreasing, constant, and then discontinuities I will talk about as well. So this is something I want you to know for class on Wednesday, which is why I asked you to watch this video, and if you want to, fill in these notes. So we make sure you always are reading your graph from left to right, just like we read a book. So as you go left to right, you can really trace with your finger, and you'll be able to see as you're going from left to right if the graph is increasing, decreasing, or constant. So I'm going to take my pen and just trace the graph. Notice how my pen's going up. That means this part I'm increasing. Now, this is considered a discontinuity because I have to jump graphs, but that's okay. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. I'm going to continue to trace with my pen, and notice how my pen is just going right across. It's a nice horizontal line. This means I'm looking at an interval that's constant. And then I pick up my pen again, and I notice that I'm going down. So that means here I'm decreasing. So the hardest part for students is usually telling me what interval each of these things are happening. So when you look at the graph, it's pretty easy to tell where it's increasing, decreasing, and constant, but how we write it is kind of weird. So let's talk about that. We're always going to write those intervals in terms of the domain. So what does that mean? That means these intervals, let me write this down. All these intervals are for x values. And you're always going to be using parentheses because at the endpoints, you're not really increasing or decreasing. So just use endpoints. So let's take a look. First off was that increasing interval. Because of this arrow, we really don't have an endpoint. So we can say from negative infinity all the way up to this point, which x coordinate is -2. Now our next interval was constant. And if you look at those x values, it was -2 to 1. So I'm going to squeeze in here the -2, 1 for constant interval. And then the last interval was decreasing, last part of our graph. And that x value was 1, and then we had an arrow again. So that means it's going to be 1 to infinity. Sorry, I'm not very practiced with my infinities. I haven't been doing them in a while, so they look a little funky. So that's really increasing, decreasing, and constant. It's not hard to see on the graph, but how we write it's a little weird. So let's go back and do domain and range. Our domain for this particular graph, well, if we take a look, every place is kind of covered. And with these arrows, it means we're going to keep going down and to the left, and we keep going down and to the right over here. So we really have a domain of all real numbers. And then our range, because both of these pieces, the red and the blue piece, go down, we are definitely at a negative infinity, but the highest up we go is this 4. But it's an open dot, so it's not included. So our range is negative infinity to 4. All right, so let's write down some of that stuff that we just did. I'm going to change the thickness. So an increasing interval as you move from left to right. So notice it says left to right. The interval of the x values for which the y value goes up. And if you're tracing the graph with your finger or your pen, you're going to see that just naturally. Decreasing, again, moving left to right on the x-axis, this is when the y values go down. And constant interval is, again, as you move left to right, the y values stay the same. And my experience is students can definitely point on a graph where things are increasing, decreasing, and constant, but the hardest part is always to give that answer in terms of domain. All right, let's take a look at some examples so that we can really talk about this. So we have two pieces to this graph, so definitely some discontinuities here. By the way, discontinuity, there's several different types. In here, probably the biggest type of discontinuity we have is like this is considered a jump. So because we're jumping pieces, we go from one piece to another. So just to know that, erase that. I'll just keep the jump up there so you know that there's a jump. Okay, so if I trace again with my pen, I can definitely tell if it's going up or down. So left to right, I'm going down. So this is a decreasing interval. Now my x values were -4 to 0. Okay, next piece, I'm going up. So that's from x equals 0 to x equals 2. So 0, 2. And then constant looks like from 2, well, it kind of looks like this graph goes on. We're going to put a little arrow in there. So that means from 2 to infinity, it is constant. Now, is this graph continuous? Definitely not. That's because that jump in there between the two pieces means that it's not one piece. All right. We need to practice our domain and range. So domain, remember, is left to right. Doing a lot of left to rights here. So leftmost point is -4. It's an open dot, so it gets a parenthesis. And even though there's this jump, 0 is included because it's included down here when y is 3. And then we have basically the rest of the graph going on to infinity. So our domain is -4 to infinity. Right, range is a little bit more interesting. So remember, range is bottom to top. So the bottommost part of our graph is that 3. And the 3 is a closed circle, so we're going to give it a bracket. As we go up, 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 we have y values all the way up to 4. Once we hit that point, -4, 4, it's an open dot, so that's going to get a parenthesis. Let me rewrite that so it looks a little nicer. We have bracket 3, comma 4, parenthesis. Okay, let's take a look at, say, one more example, and then I will be done with this video. Be sure to reach out again if you have questions. All right, so for this one, I'm going up for that piece, so that's definitely increasing. So my x values are -4 to -2. This piece, we're going down as we go left to right. So that's decreasing. So that's going to be from x equals -1, x equals 2. And then this third piece, I go back up. So what I'm going to do is put a little union, and I'm going to put from 3 to 4. So what this says is the graph is increasing from x equals -4 to x equals -2, and from x equals 3 to x equals 4. Now realize we don't have any places where the graph is constant. Oops. Sorry about that. I leaned on my computer and it did not like that. So what do we say in the decreasing? That's -1 to 2. All right, constant. We're going to say NA. Continuous, this is definitely a no. We've got lots of jumps. Again, we actually have 2 jumps that we have to make. All right, our domain is also going to look a little weird. So our domain, we have 3 pieces. So our domain is going to be 3 pieces. So kind of an interesting one to look at here. So our first domain, we have an open dot and then a closed dot. So that means we're going to do parenthesis, -4 to -2, bracket, union. And then we have open dots on both pieces, that middle piece. So I'm going to do parenthesis, -1 to 2. And then union, I'm going to write this down below, 3, 4. Those both get brackets because I have closed dots on either endpoint. Now let's take a look at the range. The range, remember, is bottom to top. So we look at the bottom, we have from that -4, we have -3, -2, definitely have -1. Basically have all, so all the way up to 5, that is. So it looks like we started from -4, which is an open circle, so that's going to be a parenthesis. And we go all the way up to a y value of 5, which is also an open nut. So parenthesis as well. All right, I'm going to stop this video here. Again, reach out if you have any questions. It is sidolic@nths.net. We can get on a Zoom call. I'm now working from home, from school, so I actually have a little bit more time. All right, folks, thanks for listening, and I will see you in class on Wednesday.